Hey, we back, baby. We ready to roll. It's time to kick some ass up in this piece. Mediokr and Best Sports Podcast. Thank you for tuning in with Realistic Randy. Starting season 3 up off this piece. I just got back from Myrtle Beach about a week ago, so I'm ready to just roll right on with this. Preseason starts tomorrow for the Minnesota Vikings. On Saturday, they go up against Case Keenum and the Denver Broncos, and we'll have to see how Case Keenum looks with his new squad. So anyway, there's going to be a big preseason for a couple of players and for a specific position group. I'll get into that just a little bit. But first, real quick, the offensive line. So news came out that Nick Easton is going to be likely out for the year, according to Adam Schefter, okay, after getting surgery to repair a herniated disc in his neck. And when I saw that, I said to myself, there's nothing to worry about. What is there to worry about? Because you know why? I got up on this podcast right after draft night. Or maybe it wasn't right after draft night. But anyway, I gave my draft recap on this team as far as Rick Spielman and how he didn't draft. And this was after free agency period where I was like, oh, you signed Eric Hendricks. You got Danielle Hunter. This is great. This is amazing. Great job, Rick Spielman. Sheldon Richardson, the 3 technique to play with Linval Joseph. Fantastic job, Rick. You got an A for that free agency period, dog. Hey, I gave him an A for that, and then come draft time, I gave him a D. Why? Because in my opinion, they didn't address the offensive line, especially after Joe Berger retired. You had a void at guard, and then not only that, my point was, well, you know what? You've got Riley Reef, you got Pat Elflein at center, you got Mike Remmers at right tackle, so at least you got those 3 points there. And to Mike Remmers' credit, I was really worried about him going into 2017. To his credit, I thought he was okay. I thought he did really well as far as for the expectations that I thought Mike Remmers would be the right tackle of Matt Khalil, and he wasn't that at all. I thought he was okay, and that's all we need. For what it's worth, for what we went through in the past, that's exactly what we need. Beggars cannot be choosers, right? You move Mike Remmers from right tackle to right guard because you don't address the guard spot in the draft. You could have had Will Hernandez. You could have had Braden Smith. But instead of addressing the offensive line for this year, you signed an $84 million contract to guaranteed to Kirk Cousins, fully guaranteed, right? You would think you would invest in the offensive line to protect that man. But you didn't do it. You took Mike Hughes, the cornerback Mike Hughes, at what, 30? In the first round, I was like, oh, that's a little bit weird. I would have went Will Hernandez, but, you know, it's fine. Day 2 is coming up. Trade up. You can get Mike Hughes, and you can get Will Hernandez, Braden Smith, or whoever the hell else. Who cares? Get somebody to address this offensive line for this year. Not only did you not trade up, you went and took Brian O'Neill, who is a project offensive tackle, who is not expected to start this year. I mean, the depth chart of the Minnesota Vikings, the first official depth chart of the Minnesota Vikings came out a couple of days ago. Brian O'Neill, from what I saw, is second in the right tackle spot behind Rashad Hill. So anyway, you don't address the offensive line for this year, right? I gave him a D. I gave him a D, and I got crushed for it. Oh, man, Randy, you're so you should change your name to Negative Nathaniel. You are so negative. How could you do this? You should have some belief in. And you know what I say to myself? You're right. Maybe I am a little bit too negative. Maybe I am just too negative and just bashing stuff for no reason. I need to have an optimistic approach to this. So when I see news that our entire interior line on the offensive side of the ball is missing significant time in training camp, Pat Elflein, I'm not worried about him. He's recovering from surgery. But Mike Remmers, he's a wild card. There's been no update on him. Who knows when he's going to come back, if he does come back. And then not only that, Nick Easton, he's now out for the year. When I see news like that, you know what I say to myself now? I say, hey, don't worry about it. It's all good. You know why? Because we got Mike Hughes. Because let me tell you something right now. You didn't address the offensive line. I don't want to hear any excuses from Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman. Rick Spielman, for the love of God, you've gone through, we have so many examples of how an offensive line could derail an entire season. 2016, right? 2016, as far as the defense, our defense was still pretty damn good in 2016. It was damn good. It may not have been #1 in the league defense good like 2017. But it was damn good. You still had the same roster, the same personnel on the defensive side of the ball, right? Okay? You still had Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen on offense. You had a better quarterback. It's not even an opinion. Sam Bradford's a better quarterback than Case Keenum, all right? But anyway, you had Bradford fully healthy in 2016. You had Adam Thielen. You had Stephon Diggs, the same personnel on the defensive side of the ball that you had last year, right? And what was the difference? You went 8-8 that year. Why? Because your offensive line couldn't block worth a damn. Whereas you go into 2017, Rick Spielman, you finally addressed the offensive line for that particular year. You brought in Riley Reef. You signed, or you drafted Pat Elflein in the, third round, I believe. You brought in Mike Remmers, who I was a little bit concerned about. But to his credit, I thought he did a pretty good job last year, right? Hey, you did that, and what happens? We get an offensive line. You bring in the zone blocking scheme. Case Keenum is a downgrade quarterback from Sam Bradford when Sam Bradford's healthy, and you go from 8-8 to 13-3. Why? Because the offensive line can block. And yes, Case Keenum, he can get outside the pocket. He made the offensive line look a little bit better than what it was, but I thought the offensive line was not that bad. I thought it was actually okay, maybe even pretty good in a couple of instances, right? And then you see that you lose Joe Berger, and then you go into the NFC Championship game. You have to switch things around. Nick Easton, I believe he had to replace Pat Elflein at center at one point. Mike Remmers had to go at guard, right? And it was a disaster. A disaster. You didn't address the offensive line, and now we're sitting here scrambling. And Richie Incognito, he's like, well, the Vikings called me, and Mike Zimmer, he's like, well, you could tweet that. We're not interested at all. And look, hey, I'm off the Richie Incognito train, all right? I'm done with that dude. But my thing is, I do believe there's some truth to that as far as Rick Spielman was contacting Richie Incognito. I do think there's some truth to it. Why? Because of the patterns they've showed in the past. You called Jake Long in 2016 off the couch to replace bum-ass Matt Khalil at left tackle. It would not shock me one bit if they were calling around trying to pick up. It didn't have to be this way. It really, really didn't, okay? And I don't want to hear nothing about Will Hernandez. Oh, he doesn't fit the zone blocking schemes. What the hell are we talking about? Maybe he doesn't, okay? But guess what? Last year, 2017, we introduced the zone blocking scheme, right? Who was that started by? Pat Shurmur, okay? Pat Shurmur brought in the zone blocking scheme as the offensive coordinator for the Vikings last year, right? Now, Pat Shurmur, he's the head coach now with the New York Giants. Where did Will Hernandez go? Oh, that's right, the New York Giants under Pat Shurmur, and he's looked great in camp so far. All right, maybe he can't do zone blocking scheme, but guess what? Adjust, do something, because I tell you what, are we better off now? Well, we don't need Will Hernandez. We'll just stick it out with Danny Isidoro, or we'll bring in Mike Remmers at guard. I thought Mike Remmers did a good job at right tackle. I'm concerned about him being at right guard. There was no reason to have to do all this crap that you've been doing before, and the amount of excuses that we come up for Rick Spielman every single time when he does this. Well, we got some guys in camp. They could show up. Oh, you never know. Every year we do this except 2017. But why didn't you carry that momentum from 2017 over to right now? And Mike Zimmer, you don't get a pass either. Look, I love Mike Zimmer. All right? No disrespect to him. Love Mike Zimmer. He's the reason why we turned that god-awful defense that we've had in years past to number one in the league. He is the reason for that. And the development he's had with Xavier Rhodes, Trey Waynes, this dude is a mastermind on defense. But this dude needs to be called out on this one thing. It appears that based on the track record and the pattern the behavior that's being shown when it was spectated, or when there was speculation where the Vikings, they may be in the running for Kirk Cousins, and Mike Zimmer went out on the podium and said, well, it's not just one guy that makes this team. It's a collective group of guys, not just one guy. And then not only that, you go into this draft and you take Mike Hughes, who could be really, really good. I'm not poo-pooing the pick. He could be really good. It was not a necessity for this year, right? You're in this window right now. I thought you were trying to win a damn Super Bowl. Is that what we're trying to do? Is that what we're trying to do? If you're more interested in you are not Mike Zimmer. You are not this glorified chief executive, high-level defensive coordinator anymore, okay? You are the head football coach. This offensive line, the offensive line problems fall on you too. So what are we doing? Are we just going to keep doing this every single year? Well, I guess we'll just pick up some dude. Just go to every gym within a 50-mile or maybe 100-mile radius outside of US Bank Stadium. Anybody you see doing bench presses, just bring them in for a workout, because that's basically what you've been doing this entire time, right? And I'm not sitting here. Look, the Vikings, can they go 10-6 or 11-5? Yes, I think they'll go 10-6 at least. I would have said 11-5 if you address the offensive line, even with the schedule, but they didn't do it. I'm bumping it down to 10-6. Can they go 10-6? Yes. Can they make the playoffs? Yes. But that's not the goal. I thought you're trying to win a damn Super Bowl, right? And the whole formula, it's out there. It's known that as far as to win a championship It starts with the trenches on both sides of the ball. Quarterback is the most important position on the field. You need an offensive line to protect him, and you need a defensive line to go after that quarterback, right? How many times in that NFL, look, the Eagles, right? Jason Peters was gone last year for damn near all of last year. The Philadelphia Eagles played 12 games last year without Jason Peters. That's including the playoffs, right? And they brought in this guy, oh, man, I can't pronounce this dude's name. Anyway, they call him Big V. Right? Replaced Jason Peters at left tackle, and they still dominated up front on the offensive line. You have to invest in the offensive line, whether starting offensive lineman or depth. You have to keep doing it, because I tell you what, how many times in that NFC Championship game did we see Nick Foles dropping back behind that line and just chilling, having all day to do whatever the hell he wants? And you know what happens? When you have all sorts of time to throw the ball, these receivers can run extended routes, and defensive backs, you can only keep up with these dudes for so long, right? We saw it. We got first-hand glimpse of it, and we decide not to do that. If you're trying to win a Super Bowl, guess what? You might have to face the Eagles again. You might have to face the LA Rams, which, by the way, you're facing both of them in the regular season no matter what. But if you're talking about in the playoffs, you might have to face one or both of them. And with those defensive lines they got, Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh, and with Fletcher Cox, those some nasty dudes, man. They're going to get after it. With this makeshift tape, just, I don't know, patchwork type of interior offensive lineman we got. Are you confident that they'll go up there and we're just going to kick some ass against these dudes? Really? So I don't want to hear any excuses. None whatsoever. That's why I say, with all this drama, we were calling around offensive linemen. We're this third grade center we have. What's his name? Cornelius Edison. I don't have his name in front of me. But hey, look, I'm tired of going through this every year, but when I see stuff like this, you know what? It's cool. It's fine. You know why? Because we got Mike Hughes. Next topic. Preseason. This is a big preseason for a couple of players in particular and a position group. Let's throw this out the way. We don't need that anymore. Offensive line talk. Preseason. Couple of players, this is a big preseason for, and I mentioned this on the podcast, or not on the podcast, but, by the way, I'm doing a joint podcast now. I should probably be mentioning this stuff earlier in the show instead of just doing it in the middle. I kind of ramble on sometimes, but bear with me. Doing a joint podcast now with SK from the Skull Report, another fellow amateur Vikings blogger and podcaster. We're going to join forces, so that way, if you don't have to necessarily listen to me talk to myself on this podcast anymore, or please do. Please keep watching. Please keep listening to the show, but you can also listen to the joint podcast that we'll be doing. But anyway, I brought this up as far as preseason, some big name players, or not even big name players, but some players that I'm looking forward to, because this is a big preseason for them. Number one, Laquan Treadwell. So according to all reports and beat writers, he's having a great camp. I even saw a couple of videos where posted about a Vikings website during training camp where Laquan Treadwell, he got a few catches off of Xavier Rhodes. He's had a pretty good camp. Guess what? I don't care. All right, now I'm not ruling him out. My thing is, and look, I've heard Kendall Wright, he hasn't had a good camp. My thing is, just off of track record and everything like that, Kendall Wright should be the number 3 guy automatically. But if he's having a good camp, good for him. I'm not going to be sold until I see this dude in the preseason against other teams, against opposing teams. If he could show out, and look, can Kirk Cousins make Laquan Treadwell look better than what he has the last 2 years? Yeah, because that's my whole thing with Kirk Cousins. He's had not so great receivers in Washington. He hasn't had the best talent around him. Sure, Kirk Cousins can make Laquan Treadwell look good, but I need to see it. My thing with Laquan is he's not good at getting separation. He's not good as far as speed is concerned. You need to have those traits as far as route running, speed, all that stuff as an NFL wide receiver. But look, if he does good in preseason, more power to him. Now, the thing is, he's going to be the 5th option on this team now, because you got the 2 receivers, Diggs and Thielen. Dalvin Cook, he's coming back. Kyle Rudolph goes from the number 3 guy to number 4 now with Dalvin Cook coming back, and Laquan Treadwell will then be number 5 if he wins that 3rd receiver slot. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Number 2, Mackenzie Alexander. You got Holton Hill and Mike Hughes breathing down your neck. They're having great camps. I'm interested to see what this Holton Hill guy looks like in the preseason. I've heard a lot about him, so I'm interested to see undrafted free agent. I'm interested to see how he looks. But Mackenzie Alexander, he'll make the team. He knows Mike Zimmer's system. And you know what, to his credit, he made a lot of nice plays last season, in my opinion. He wasn't consistent enough where you could say, okay, we'll throw him out there as a consistent slot corner or nickel corner. But you know what? He made a lot of good plays last year. I'll give him credit for that. He's going to have to step it up. And look, Mackenzie Alexander, people may not remember. I remember this dude came in with tons of hype coming in when he got drafted. So we'll have to see how this is a make or break year for Laquan Treadwell and Mackenzie Alexander for those two guys. And then finally, one position group that I'm looking forward to, not even looking forward to, I'm actually a little bit uneasy about this because I posted this on Facebook and I posted this on Twitter, the kicking competition. I'm a little bit uneasy with where this is going, right? Daniel Carlson, if I'm not mistaken, the Vikings traded up to draft Daniel Carlson, kicker out of, where's he, Auburn? Kicker out of Auburn. Yeah, that's where he came from. So anyway, drafted him in the 5th round. And look, got all this hype and all this good stuff. And that's good. That's all well and good and fantastic. But look, I'm really uneasy. And Matthew Collar brought this up too. And I thought it's a really good point. I can't take credit for this, but this is a really good point he brought up. He said, look, drafting kickers is almost unnecessary at this point because they're basically being paraded around. They've got the job. No matter. You saw Roberto Aguayo, Tampa Bay. They traded up in the 2nd round to draft him. Is that GM still there for Tampa Bay? You should be fired for drafting a kicker in the 2nd round. And then Young Ho Koo for the LA Chargers, right? All this hype. And Roberto Aguayo, he was the most accurate kicker in NCAA history up until he got drafted, right? And he was a disaster. I don't know what it is about kickers and I feel like Daniel Carlson, while they're saying, oh, well, it's a battle between him and Kai Forbath, I think this is Spielman's new guy now. We're trying to put on this show where, it's a kicking competition. But in the end, I feel like we're going to cut Kai Forbath, and I think that's going to be a huge mistake. Look, if you want to keep Daniel Carlson, keep him. But I'm just so afraid of just throwing this dude out there. And look, his college stats mirror Blair Walsh a little bit as far as the yo-yo pattern, right? Blair Walsh, University of Georgia, he went up and down. His first year, he kicked, 65.5%. Last year, 60%. And then between those years, 91% and 87%, right? And then his senior year, he dropped down to 60%. That's pretty bad. Daniel Carlson didn't have a drop-off that bad, but the yo-yo effect is still there. 75% his first year at Auburn. In between that, 85%, 87.5%, and then dropping down, 13 percentage points down to 74%. His senior year. So look, I just, that yo-yo effect, man. And even if you have great stats, like I said, Roberto Aguayo, he's getting paraded around. He's this great kicker. He's going to kick some ass, all this hype. And it just didn't work out. Kai Forbath, he's had his faults. And look, he misses extra points. He can be goofy at times. But the dude is mentally tough, man. And look, I'm not just saying this because, Blair Walsh. He is the complete opposite of Blair Walsh because the dude takes each kick in stride. He doesn't let a bad kick affect him. Think about that. What was it? A 53-yard field goal attempt with just under or just shy above a minute and a half left in regulation against the Saints in that divisional round, right? And if he didn't make it, the game is over. The game is over. They'll probably just run out the clock and the game is over. He made that, man. He made it. Look, if Blair Walsh was there, we know what would have happened in that case. So I'm just saying that pressure in the playoffs is going to come down to kicks. It's tight, man. You're going to have to make kicks. Maybe this dude, Daniel Carlson, just give him a year to get some experience down as far as to watch Kai Forbath. But I think just casting Kai Forbath on, and if you remember, the Minnesota Vikings, they drafted Blair Walsh and they cut Ryan Longwell. And I was like, what the hell are you doing? They cut Ryan Longwell after drafting Blair Walsh just because, this is a new guy. Oh, Blair Walsh has got a big leg. And I'm like, what are you doing, Ryan Longwell? He's been our most reliable kicker in a long-ass time, as long as I've been a fan. Look, I wasn't around for that Gary Anderson miss in 98. My condolences to all those Vikings fans out there. I came around in 2000. Ryan Longwell's been our best kicker that I've ever seen as a Vikings fan. And they cut him for Blair Walsh because of all the hype as soon as they drafted him. So I'm just wondering if they're going to do the same thing with Kai Forbath. You should keep him around. The dude's mentally tough, man. It gets overlooked so much. This dude deserves a lot more credit and a lot more respect than what he's getting from Rick Spielman. So anyway, coming up next, we'll talk about what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about Randy Moss. Randy Moss is he's a first ballot Hall of Fame selection, and good for him, by the way. We're going to talk about, I'm going to double down why he's the greatest receiver of all time. I don't want to hear about Jerry Stickum Rice. I don't want to hear about Terrell Owens. We'll talk about that next. Mediokr at Best Sports Podcast, Realistic Randy.
Yeah, we worked hard, but now let's play. Pretty girls, they'll come our way. We kicking back, let's all just say it's gonna be a good day.
We've been grinding, not caring what the time is. When I'm in my town, I'm only chilling with the finest. I've been out here trying to kick it for a minute.